Welcome to Fangirl Football. I'm Judy.
I'm Tiffany.
And I'm Lauren.
Let's dive into week 5 of DFS. We have a couple of free daily fantasy contests going this weekend. Check the description for links. And I could use the discussion to help me identify who to target and build my lineup and be competitive this weekend. Starting with last week, how'd we do?
So yeah, our lineup that we built last week did really well. We turned $3 into $25 and we almost cracked the top 1,000 of a contest that had 288,000. So we did really well. You can see here, our lineup was 172 points, almost 173, and the winning one was 208. One thing to note on that winning lineup was it wasn't even the top possible lineup because they played the stack of CJ Stroud, Nico Collins, and Stephon Diggs. And CJ Stroud, we can look compared to Justin Fields, he scored 9 points less than Justin Fields and he cost $1,000 more. So they could have definitely put in Justin Fields instead of CJ Stroud and scored even more points. But no one played that lineup because they were doing the stacking that we usually do. But this is a great example of how a quarterback can stand alone instead of stacking. So I wanted to make sure to go through that because we always do talk about stacking, but these running quarterbacks, it is a good note that they could stand by themselves. You can see some of the players that we had in common. Derrick Henry, everyone had to have Derrick Henry at 37.4 points. It was very helpful to have Nico Collins, which we did not because he scored 30 points. And Jordan Addison made his return to fantasy for the Minnesota Vikings and got the touchdown from Jalen Nailor and had 21 points. So that was a great play. We could have improved. I think we had talked about stacking Justin Fields with Pat Fairmuth down here, the tight end, and the winning lineup played tight end Pat Fairmuth, but we went with Dalton Kincaid, so we could have definitely had another 7 points there if we would have played that tight end. But all in all, it was a good day. Defenses didn't matter a whole lot. You can see that we had the Raiders at 9 points. They were fine. The winning one had Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 11. So again, this week, FanDuel is offering the overlay contest, and we're going to head over there so we can go into the lobby and look for these overlay contests. So again, the overlay contest is a contest where one, FanDuel isn't taking a share of the pot, and two, they're putting in even more money into the pot so that you either win more or they get to usually pay more places in both of these cases. And last week, we saw only the $3 contest. This week, they've returned with both the $3 contest and the quarter contest. And one thing to note in both of these contests is you can enter 150 times, but they're going to fill. Way, way back in the day when Daily first started, we would see contests not fill. And that was actually the only way that you got an overlay. But nowadays, these contests all fill. So these are going to fill. We are going to go through. You can reserve an entry. You do have to remember to go back and set your lineup. So if you do try to reserve an entry and then so you can go back on Sunday morning or something and set it, you've got to remember to go back and set it. But since they will fill, and you can see the quarter one's already 33% full, and this is Friday morning. So when I went back in on Sunday morning to do more entries in that $3 contest, it was already full and I couldn't create any more entries. So let's go ahead and reserve. I'm going to reserve one in both of these. And just to do that, we just click on it. And then right here, you can do a reserve without lineup. So I'm going to click that. It asks me how many I want to reserve. So I'm going to tell it I want 10 because I want to enter this contest 10 times this week. And if you click off of the 10, then you can reserve with cash. So I'll reserve 10 with cash. So now I'll be able to go back and enter those lineups. To find them, you can just go into upcoming and you can see that I still have 30 lineups here. And then if I look at it, I can see all of them. So let's go into one of our lineups. I'll go into a $3 lineup and we're going to set our lineup now. So now we're in here and you can see all of the game tiles. One thing that I wanted to note is we do have a Sunday contest this week. So we have the Jets at Minnesota, but it's in London. and that's at 9:30. You can see that that game is not part of the main slate for FanDuel. There's no 9:30 game or the Minnesota and Jets game here in the game tiles. We do have the Sunday night game. They're continuing to use the Sunday night game in their main slate, and DraftKings doesn't use that Sunday night game, but they do here at FanDuel. So, Lauren, you ready to break down the games?
Yeah, let's chat about the games and figure out which ones we should focus on to start with. I did do a little bit of research ahead of recording this on how this season has looked so far. And for games with an over under 50 or greater, all of them have ended up under by a 2 touchdown average. Although that sample size is really small with only 3 games. But on the other side, for games with an over under less than 40, 66% of them have also ended up under the over under number there. So if we're looking for games that are more likely to be high scoring, should we stick to ones that are between like 40 and 50 and not really go for that really high one, maybe?
It's interesting that they're missing that top game of the week and that it's going on the over or going on the under because for the most part, games are hitting that over. Last week, we had 10 of the 16 games hit the over, but apparently they weren't in these two categories, probably.
No, they were all between 40 and 50 over
That's
unders
interesting.
projected. Yeah.
I This week we have a lot of games that are in that target range. So it should be a fun week or they are tired of the games hitting on the over and they're boosting up the scores a little bit.
Yeah. Last night's game was a lot of fun with a lot of back and forth scoring. So I hope we get more of that this weekend.
Yeah, that's for sure. I enjoyed that game. Couldn't quite stay up till the end, but I've watched the replays of it. So game's going into overtime on Thursday night. So let's get started with our first game. You can see here we've got Buffalo at Houston, and Houston is favored by a point. The over under is 47.5. So at least we're below that 50. And this is one of my favorite games, but the injuries here have me like super concerned. So Buffalo's coming off a bad loss to Baltimore, and they're beat up, but they're also playing a equally as beat up Houston team that can put up a lot of points, but those injuries are concerning. Houston's still without Joe Mixon, Damian Pierce, and Tank Dell. Tank Dell was limited in practice on Thursday, though, so we may see him return to this. And Diggs gets to play his old team. Is this a revenge game for Stephon Diggs to get to play
I
the
think a little
Buffalo
bit.
Bills a little bit?
I think a
Um,
little bit, but I also want to check out Nico Collins there. He's been having some really good games.
yes, he has been the top wide receiver for the NFL, I believe. So he's definitely been the top fantasy producer and seems to be the favorite. But that might be a reason that we go with Stephon Diggs because he's motivated and they may be, keying on Nico Collins to shut him down. It's hard to shut them both down.
You can only pick one to cover
Yeah.
solidly. Otherwise, one of them is going to get through and be able to make the catches.
Yep. Definitely.
What
So
about the other side of the ball?
So Buffalo has their own injury concerns. So Khalil Shakir is not practicing. He didn't practice on Thursday. He has an ankle injury. So maybe we'll get to see some more Coleman show up. We've been waiting for that to happen. Or we could go back to Dalton Kincaid. So if you remember last week, we played Kincaid and he only had 7 points, but maybe this is his week. If Shakir isn't there, then maybe Josh Allen is relying a little bit more on Dalton Kincaid. Let's go see where Kincaid's priced just so we know. I'm going to click that game only, and now I'll limit the players that I'm seeing to just those players. And we can see that Kincaid's at 6,100. He's not bad. That's still gonna end up if I look over at the quarterback, that's still and Josh Allen's at 9,300. I usually like my stacks to be home teams as well. I prefer a home team that might be playing from behind. So we might look at CJ Stroud. So CJ Stroud's 900 less than Josh Allen, and I feel he could put up pretty much equal points. And then we'll look over at players. So Nico's up there, and then Nico's at 8,800 and Stephon Diggs at 7,600. So we'll definitely have to keep these in mind if this is a game that we end up wanting to stack. It is one of the ones on my list. I'm still a little bit leery with the injuries at running back. It looks, yeah, both Mixon and Pierce are out. So without that running game, they haven't been producing quite as much.
Is there a way to know? Is there a place to see projected percent ownership so I could know if I really like Nico Collins, but if I want to know if I really should have waited or not?
Yeah, I go to Fantasy Pros. So in Fantasy Pros, I'll just pop over here real quick. If you go under their DFS tab, and I think this requires a membership, so you would have to have a subscription to Fantasy Pros. But over here under DFS, you can go to roster percentages, and it'll bring up this page that will show you estimates. So they're not real. It's not like they really know exactly who's going to be there, but you can see here Josh Allen is expected to be 10 to 20% owned. Lamar Jackson's the big one popping off here at 20 to 30% owned. But hey, in the top 5, I don't even see CJ Stroud. So I like that.
Also interesting because wasn't he part of last week's top lineup too?
He was. And wow, if I open this up, where is he? Wow, he's way down here at 1 to 5%. All right, we're gonna keep him on our list because I do really like
Yeah,
that. Let's go ahead.
below.
I guess they're expecting these injuries but he's at home, and if he's playing behind, he's gonna be throwing. So I do really like that. Let's go ahead and go back here and keep going through our games. Next up, we've got Carolina at Chicago, and Chicago's favored by 3.5, and it's a 42 point over under. Carolina's been rolling with Andy Dalton, but this is a pretty good defense with Chicago, and they looked good in their win over the Rams last week. Wide receiver Deontay Johnson for the Panthers is battling an ankle injury, and he was limited in practice Thursday. Probably see him play, but are we going to see more Xavier Legette instead of Deontay Johnson?
I like Xavier Legette.
I know, it's hard not to. He's been a strong rookie. I like a running back from this game, but I can't really seem to pick one too well. I like Chuba Hubbard. He's definitely getting all the carries there and at 6,800. I like DeAndre Swift, but he's not super talented, but I like him in this matchup at 6,400. So these are a couple of running backs that I want to keep on the radar when we start building a team here. Let's move on to Cleveland at Washington. Washington's favored by 3.5 points, and the over-under is 45. I feel like this is all on the Commanders, and I don't know. Maybe they're expecting a bigger performance out of Deshaun Watson. And I love Jaden Daniels, but I don't know. This game doesn't excite me, and I don't necessarily feel like it's going to hit the over. If it hits the over, I feel like it's going to be all Jaden Daniels. And then the Commanders have some injury notes as well. So Brian Robinson didn't practice on Thursday, but Austin Eckler is coming back from his concussion. So we may see a swap in the running backs there that get used. I like Jerry Judy, the wide receiver in Cleveland at 5,900 this week against the weak defense. I just wish we weren't playing with Deshaun Watson. And the Commanders actually shut down the Cardinals last week. So can they do the same to Cleveland? We've all gotten used to, going on and on about how bad their defense is, but last week it wasn't that bad.
I mean, I think we both picked Washington in this when we were doing our picks in the last episode. I think this is going to be dominated by Washington. How much would we want to pick for lineups from this game?
It's not top on my list for sure. Shall we move on?
Yeah, let's talk Indy at Jacksonville.
Yeah, so Jacksonville's favored by 2.5 points, 46.5 point total. And we noted this in our previous episode too, but the Colts haven't beat Jacksonville in 9 years. That's a long time to go play a game and they play each year. They're division rivals. So they play each year in Jacksonville and they haven't won there since 2014. Now we have to wait and see if Anthony Richardson or Joe Flacco will start. Anthony Richardson's been limited in practice, so we might see Flacco again. And then it looks like for sure we're not going to see Jonathan Taylor playing for the Colts with the ankle injury. So that means Trey Sermon's going to become an interesting option at 5,900 because he's going to get the workload for the Colts in that matchup. They also, though, the Colts also have injuries to their center, Ryan Kelly, and a bunch of defensive injuries. So now we go back to, is this Trevor Lawrence's game? Can a stack maybe with Brian Thompson Jr. do well in this game? And is it kind of the Jaguars, they finally get a win game
I was wondering that too because last week against Houston, Jacksonville didn't look terrible.
They didn't look
And
terrible, but there's a difference in they didn't look terrible and scoring all the points that we need, and that's what I'm afraid of in this game.
I think we could maybe it's not our main top lineup, but I would be interested in doing a lineup with a stack from Jacksonville.
From here.
Yeah.
All right, we'll keep it on the list. Let's move on over to Baltimore at Cincinnati. And this is a fun game. Baltimore's favored by 2.5 in Cincinnati, and the over under is 49.5, which surprises me a little bit. It seems like this game is definitely projected a little bit higher than it maybe has the potential to be. But if we look at how these two teams have done against the over unders in all their games, Baltimore's hit the over in every game this year that they've played. And the Bengals are 3 out of 4 on hitting the over. But I feel like because of that, they've moved the over under up to 49.5. I'm still, I think, going on the over on this game, but I don't know if we're actually going to get it. I think we will, but you never know. In some of these division games, you just end up not getting the right matchups that you want. But it's still one I think we need to have on our list. The pieces are going to be really expensive with, let's go ahead and look at Lamar Jackson, 8,800, Joe Burrow, 7,800. So again, I like the home team, that quarterback. If we went with that story that Joe Burrow is going to be behind and going to have to pass the ball, but there's no way that we can probably afford Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase at 9,300. So we would have to start looking at T. Higgins at 6,800, and maybe T. Higgins could have a big day, and that's the stack that we want to go with.
What about Derrick Henry? Is Derrick Henry going to be too expensive?
What is Derrick Henry? He's 9,200, and it's hard not to go with Derrick Henry. How he's had a monster year so far and just racking up the yards with 199 last week. And I do find that players that score these big points and end up winning these lineups for us, they tend to repeat. Maybe not the next week, but you generally don't have somebody popping in and scoring 35 points that's never scored 35 points before. So I could definitely see him repeating. So he's one, we've got to keep him on our radar. I'd love to pay for Derrick Henry and maybe afford a few other pieces, but we'll have to save somewhere else. And I'm not sure this is going to be the game that we can stack with all the expensive parts.
Yeah, I
Let's
definitely
go.
don't think this is going to be the stacking one. I don't know
Yeah,
how much we're going to pull it all from Miami at New England with the over under of 35.5. That's way below our cutoff.
it is. The only thing that we could play here, I would feel like, would be a defense. So we could look at the Patriots defense, 4,100. It's interesting that the Dolphins defense is priced similarly. It's not my favorite defense. We'll get to some more defenses later in some games that I like much better than either of these teams. So we'll just keep moving because there's just nothing I want in that game. Anything you are interested in?
Let's talk Arizona at San Francisco. Over under is just below that 50 mark at 49.5. San
It
Francisco's favored by 7.
it is. So the question comes in, can Arizona make this a competitive game? Vegas doesn't think they can. I think they can. This is one of my favorite games to probably stack. And they have a history of hitting near 50 points. Only one Arizona game has been on the under so far, but that's usually because they are giving up a lot of points. But because they are also explosive, I feel like the teams they're playing feel like they need to score a lot of points to make sure that there's not some big comeback. So even when it's not competitive, like we saw with Washington, because they were still throwing a ton and trying to come back, Washington just kept scoring. Marvin Harrison Jr.'s salary has dropped to 7,400. Let's go ahead and look. So he's down here at 7,400. He's a lot more reasonably priced than he has been in the last few weeks. But again, I like going on the side of the home team. And in this game, George Kittle is looking like he's not maybe going to play. George Kittle did not practice on Thursday. And without Kittle, I really like Debo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk to be more involved in this game. But we also have Jordan Mason, and maybe they'll just have to run the ball instead. And then on the Arizona side, they're getting Trey McBride back, who practiced fully on Thursday and looks to be back for this week. But I like where these, maybe not Debo's at 8,000. And so what we're looking for here at an 8,000 salary is, do we think Debo Samuel can pull off 32 points? Because we basically want 4 times his salary. He can. He's done it before, so he is definitely in that player pool that he can do that. Or we could go down to Ayuk and see if Ayuk's the one that has all the scoring this week.
And we're not going to pick up Dwan Jennings because Ayuk and Samuel both are back, and he's probably not going to get as many touches as previous weeks.
Not. Yeah, and this one, I feel like if there's a more competitive matchup and a more difficult defense to play, then we see more of the other wide receivers getting more involved in the game because the top ones get shut down, but I don't see both Debo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk getting shut down in this matchup. So let's go ahead and review Las Vegas at Denver. So the over under is 37. We're out of the range that we really want to be. Denver's favored by 3. It's really not a matchup that I'm looking to play anyone from. The Raiders are having their own meltdown, but the Broncos defense I am definitely interested in, but they are 10 to 20% owned. It's one of the more heavily owned defenses, but I still like them. And maybe we go with a heavily owned defense. We'll see. It's a defense to keep in mind. The Raiders also had 11 players who did not practice on Thursday. That's crazy. All
Let's
right.
chat Green Bay at LA Rams.
Yeah, so we're
Green
back
Bay's
to
favored by 3, over under of 47.5.
yeah, we're back in our target range. So we like this game again. It's a little surprising because the Rams, I keep thinking of all of their injuries, but really their injuries are just Puka Nakua and Cooper Cup. The rest of the injury report was pretty clean. So it's just their wide receivers, and they seem to be making do with their other wide receivers. On the Green Bay side, Jordan Love's one of the favorite quarterbacks we saw and going to be very highly owned. He threw 54 times last week, and I don't really like him at 8,200. We can go over here and see him. He's at 8,200. That makes me a little bit concerned. I do think this game maybe ends up on the under, that maybe the Rams get a little bit more control of it, that Green Bay doesn't try to throw as much and tries to control it a little bit more on the ground. It was only when they were behind against the Vikings that they, started throwing the ball a lot. And I'm not sure that they're going to be behind in this game and need to throw the ball that much. We still have some interesting options if we would want to go with Dontavian Wicks at 5,900 and take a chance there. Jaden Reed 7,200. And then we have Luke Musgrave didn't practice on Thursday, which brings up tight end Tucker Kraft, but he's projected at 10 to 20% owned. So I think there's some better tight ends that we could probably target on the slate that aren't going to be as heavily owned.
Anyone on the Ram side that you want to think about?
I could do, let's see, what is Kyron Williams? Kyron Williams gets all the carries. He's at 8,400. He's probably the only one that I'm really thinking of in on the Rams. I could maybe go to Atwell down at 5,600. I like that price. So yeah, there are some parts here that are possibilities.
Let's talk New York Giants at Seattle's favored by 6.5. Over under is on the lower side here, 43.5. I
Yeah,
don't know
this
how competitive this game is actually going to be.
yeah, I don't think this is the craziness that we need to get our fantasy production. There are there are injuries on both sides of this game. I still feel like Seattle's at a definite advantage, but I don't think this is our big high scoring game. I do like the Seahawks defense to Daniel Jones is a turnover machine. So hopefully the Seahawks defense, but they are on the highest owned defense, I believe. They are on target to be the highest owned defense. Wide receiver Malik Neighbors, running back Devin Singletary did not practice on Thursday. Eric Gray becomes interesting. If it wasn't in Seattle, he'd become a little bit more interesting at running back for the Giants. But I just can't go to the Giants without Neighbors and without Singletary. It just sounds like something we should stay away from.
What about the Seattle side with Kenneth Walker III?
Yeah, Kenneth Walker may be heavily used, so he is definitely one that we should look at. Let's see what his price is while we're here looking. He's at 7,400. I do like him because they shouldn't need to pass. They should be able to run the ball, and if they just want to shut this game down and move on, then it's Kenneth Walker. So I do like
And
that.
they're at home, so I could see them wanting to give the fans some extra touchdowns to watch.
Definitely. Yeah. We also have our night game. Let's go back to our game tiles. So we also have Dallas at Pittsburgh is our Sunday night game. And the over under here is 43. Pittsburgh's favored by 2.5. They are at home. I could go right back to Justin Fields like we did last week in this game. And Dallas has got a very injured defense. So I could go right back at that, especially in Pittsburgh. Brandon Cooks didn't practice for the Cowboys. Jalen Warren and Cordell Patterson didn't practice Thursday for the Steelers, so we could go back to Najee Harris. He hasn't been very good this year, but when you're getting all the carries and now we even take Cordell Patterson out of it, I do like that. So he's definitely a piece that we may be wanting to play. He's also priced at 6,500, so I really like that. I'll stay away from the Dallas side as the Pittsburgh defense should get right back on track and try to shut down Dallas.
Would you consider not stacking Fields here and just picking up Fields and maybe finding other things?
I could do that.
Skipping a stack.
We could skip the stack or we could just go Najee Harris and see if we have a stack that we like. Should we go ahead and build our lineup?
Yeah, let's build our lineup.
Okay, so some of the stacks that we did talk about that I like were Josh Allen and Keenan Coleman, Trevor Lawrence and Brian Thompson, and then Brock Purdy, Debo, Brandon Ayuk. And then we talked about the fields just now. The Purdy, Debo, Ayuk one is one that is my favorite. I don't know if you have a favorite from all of these games. Let's get all of our players back. Or should we see if we can just make that one work?
Let's see if we can make that one work. And you like that one the most because of the game story associated with it that you have.
I do. I feel like that Cardinals and 49ers are going to be on the over and that it will stay competitive and that the 49ers are going to have to score a lot of points. I like that Kittle's not there. I don't know that we can afford all the parts to this, but we can see if we can. Another one that we mentioned that I really like is CJ Stroud and stacking him as well. So maybe we'll come back and build a Stroud lineup after that. Both of these are home quarterbacks. I like on the home side. I feel like on Stroud, it's going to be a different story that they won't be winning that game. So I do like that. On the the 49ers side, it's not that they won't be winning, but that they have to score a lot of points because they're afraid the Cardinals may come back. So let's go ahead and start with Purdy. And both of these quarterbacks were not highly owned. All right, so we have Purdy, and now we're going to go over and stack him. Let's see. I'm going to just look at the players from there. So we're going to stack it. We'll try both Debo and Ayuk, assuming Kittle's out. If Kittle's not out, I'm probably not as in love with the stack as I am right now. I'm curious if we could stuff in Marvin Harrison Jr. on the other side of this as well. Let's go ahead and try it. That's kind of an interesting, now we've got Debo Samuel at 8,000, Brandon Ayuk at 6,700, Marvin Harrison Jr. at 7,400, and Brock Purdy at 7,700. So our average is dropping. Now we're down to 6,000 a player, and we've still got a lot of players that we need to do. Let's go ahead and head over to defense. I don't feel like there are a lot of defenses that are good plays this week, and there are a few that are really good. So obviously the Seahawks
Seattle.
up here at 4,800, but I don't want to pay that. And they're going to be the most owned. So I'm really looking for somebody else that I could play. I like the Broncos playing the Las Vegas Raiders, and they're down here at 4,800. So we're saving another 800 there. And let's keep looking, see if there's anyone cheaper. I could even be talked into the Commanders. I know everyone thinks their defense is horrible, but they're playing Deshaun Watson, and they could make him look silly. I don't see anyone below that. The Panthers are interesting play, but I I I would like to go with the Broncos, I think. You could play the Jaguars at 3,900, but you're only saving $100 off of the Denver Broncos, and I like the Broncos a lot better. All right, so that bumped us up to 6,500. Now we've got to see if we can find some cheaper options at running back. I don't see any way that we're stuffing Derrick Henry into this lineup. So we're looking for some bargains here at running back. Let's keep going down this list. We had talked about
Chuba?
Chuba Hubbard for the Panthers. Let's go ahead and put him in there. We're going to need somebody else around the same cost. And we talked about Najee Harris. So let's put him in there. We liked both of those. So now we need a tight end and a flex. We're down to 6,400. Let's look at our tight end and see if we can save a little money here. Tight ends have just not been really performing this week. Tight ends have just not really been performing well this year. We did talk about going back at Dalton Kincaid. I did play Kyle Pitts last night. He had that 0 in week 4, and last night he at least had, I believe, 88 yards, and he was worth about 15 points in PPR leagues. So he did come back, and I'm glad I played him again. A lot of times when they have a really bad week, it's a good idea to just go right back at them if they're really talented. But I'm not liking Tucker Kraft for Green Bay is down here at 5,300. He is probably our best option, especially at that price. All right,
I
we're
like
going to
that.
put in Tucker Kraft
Who's the
for the
person
Packers.
who, if Luke Musgrave was going to play, would you come in and rework this a little bit?
I don't think so. Tucker Kraft has been the go-to tight end for Jordan Love. So I think I would still play Tucker Kraft even if Luke Musgrave was there. That leaves us with 7,600. In DraftKings, I prefer, and we didn't do it last week, I would prefer to have a running back if I can in my flex spot. It doesn't always work, but hey, we can get Kenneth
Walker.
Walker. I do like this. We don't have Derrick Henry because we had to save at running back, but now we've got Brock Purdy, Chuba Hubbard, Najee Harris, Debo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Marvin Harrison Jr., Tucker Kraft, Kenneth Walker, and the Broncos defense.
How much
That
was
works for
Henry?
me. He 9,200.
Oh, yeah. I saw that
Yeah.
200 remaining, and I was like, oh, maybe we can move up a little bit. But with only 200 remaining, we're not getting to 9,200.
I also start getting concerned because we have seen the monster games out of Derrick Henry, but thinking about it, we're assuming that all of these players are going to get 4 times their salary. So Derrick Henry, that would mean, would need to score 38 points, which is what he did last week. And I don't know how many weeks in a row we can count on Derrick Henry producing like that. This may be the game that they do shut Henry down a little bit. Maybe we see Lamar run a little bit more, but they're all priced so up there that they're probably better options out here. And I really like this one. We are counting on that Cardinals game to go a little bit crazy, but let's go ahead and save the changes. And are you up for doing one more with that Stroud?
Yeah, let's do it.
We do have to keep an eye on Kenneth Walker and make sure he does play, but he played last week. So let's go in here. It is always interesting to try to see which ones you've got to set in where we reserved them. So now we've got our next lineup. So let's go ahead and we're looking for CJ Stroud. And who are we going to pair him with? You want to pair him with both Diggs and Nico, or you want to try to maybe afford Henry here and not do Nico? I'm afraid to not have Nico. I keep
I think we need to
Nico.
have Nico.
We'll stick Diggs in there. So we're doing this double here. Oh, this is going to get tricky. Let's go ahead and put Henry in there.
And now we can
We're
see
going
what
to
we can
try
afford. Should we
to,
go to defense?
yeah, let's go
Try
to
to
defense.
save some money?
Let's go to, and what is the lowest one we think we could play? I could play the Panthers if you think.
I think we could play the Panthers, yeah.
We might get a turnover out of Caleb Williams. So let's see if we can put him in there or them in there. So 3,100 for the Carolina Panthers. And now let's go back, and we still need a running back, a wide receiver, tight end, and flex. And where are we sitting? 5,700. We've got to look for some savings here. We could also swap out Jordan Mason for Derrick Henry or Kareem Williams
Cut.
if we need to save.
Yeah, I was about to suggest Williams.
So let's go down and see if there's anyone down here that we want to maybe target. I like Najee. He's at 5,600. We're really looking for somebody even less than that.
Charbonnet at 6,100.
I don't like him in there with, oh, here's Trey Sermon. He's going to get all the carries for the Colts with Jonathan Taylor out, and he has 5,900. Let's put him in there. So he's our savings so we can afford Derrick Henry. A lot of times this just doesn't work, where we're better off doing the more balanced players that we did in the previous lineup, but we'll give it a go. We're still sitting here at a 5,600 average, so we've got to save a little bit. Let's go ahead and go over and get our tight end. I'm going right back with Tucker Kraft at 5,300. He is definitely one of the cheaper ones.
What
We
about
could
Hunter
go Hunter
Henry?
Henry. Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's go Hunter Henry. We could even go Cole Kmet for the Bears at 5,200, but he's the same as Hunter Henry. So either one of those I think are great options. I kind of like Cole Kmet a little bit better, but we are playing the Panthers defense. Either one.
I
You like
like
Hunter Henry?
Hunter Henry. Yeah.
Okay. So he's going to save us a little bit. We still need a wide receiver and a flex, and we're sitting at 5,900 for our average. Let's go look at some of the other wide receiver options that we have around there. See who we might want to get in. I'm going to try to go a little bit. Oh, I like Brian Thomas Jr. for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's at 6,300. Let's try to work him in. I'm looking to see who's cheaper down here that may be a different option. Oh, we had Leggett.
Leggett.
I could even go Romeo Dobbs here. How much do we have left?
What about Atwell?
2-2?
Yeah.
We could go 2-2. We can take out Brian Thomas and go. We have
Around-
Coleman as well. I like Coleman at
Yeah.
5,400. There's 2-2. We can save 200 more if we go with Coleman. You want to think this is his game? We've been waiting for it.
We also have a basis of injuries. So either Josh Allen is going to have to run it himself or try to do things himself where he's actually going to have to work with his teammates.
Yeah.
And
Okay, so we have our flex spot remaining, and we've got 6,400. In that range, we've got DeAndre Swift Bears running back playing the Carolina Panthers. I do like him. I know Quentin would tell us if he was here, he does not like DeAndre Swift, but I like DeAndre Swift, and he had a good week last week. We also have Jerome Ford for the Browns playing Washington and that weaker defense as well. I think both of those are really good options at that price. And again, I'd like to have a running back in here just because of the way FanDuel does their pricing, and you only get a half point for a reception instead of the full point PPR. Do you like either of those?
I like DeAndre Swift. I think the thing that I'm going back and forth on is we're also picking up the Carolina Panthers defense.
We
So
are,
if
but
Swift does well, then our defense isn't doing well.
it still could. We're just the only reason we picked the Panthers defense was basing it on, oh, hey, they could maybe get a turnover from Caleb Williams, having a rookie quarterback in there.
True.
And so we're kind of hoping that they just get a pick six and that pays their whole salary. DeAndre Swift could
Okay.
still have a good game. Let's
We
put
could
him in
go with
there.
Swift.
We'll go with Swift. So now we've got CJ Stroud, Derrick Henry, Trey Sermon, Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs. So we triple stacked this with Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, and Keon Coleman coming back on the other side of that game. And then we've got Hunter Henry as our tight end, DeAndre Swift as our running back, and the Carolina Panthers for our defense. So we'll enter that. Now, at some point in time, I've got to go back and enter the rest of my lineups, but at least I've got them reserved. So when this fills, I can still get into the contest because they won't just open another one that has the top 50% paid. They'll open another contest, but it will pay normally and not extra.
And so when you come back, since you had 30 lineups total reserved, we've done 2. You have 28 more lineups to do. You could use that CSV upload that we've talked about previously to do them all at once.
You can. It gets a little complicated. If you're using a tool that generates things, then it becomes very easy. Otherwise, you have to like sit there with player IDs and know how to do it. It's almost easier just to set them if you're going to do it that way. And I'll
Well, and you can
probably
reuse lineups too.
you can reuse lineups, and that's what I'll do. I'll like that the basis for this one, but I'll wonder if, hey, what if I take out Derrick Henry so I can import it and then swap out Derrick Henry and save some money and then maybe get a better tight end or a better defense, but use the basis of this lineup.
I like that. I'm probably going to use some of that as a start too.
Excellent. Let's quickly go over here to Fantasy Sports Evo and pick our touchdown teams. After all of that discussion, we should know pretty much who we kind of like. I think we like the 49ers again.
Yes.
You want to put the 49ers in here?
And the Seahawks.
You want the Seahawks?
I think the Seahawks are going to have a great, and the over under is 43.5, but I think that's going to be on the over side personally.
I'm not going with you here. I think they're going to end up on the under. I don't think they have to do anything. And it could just be a 27-0 game.
But it's all the Seahawks. So maybe out of everyone, they get the most touchdowns then.
But I don't feel like they have a need to score. The Seahawks are not who I would put here. I'd be putting Green Bay, Baltimore. I like a lot of teams better. I just don't think the Seahawks are going to have to do anything. But we can put them in there. Let's put
what
them in our
about Jacksonville?
Third. I don't know that they're going to have to do anything either. I could go Jacksonville. I like Green Bay, though. Do you not like Green Bay or Baltimore?
I don't like Green Bay as much.
How about Washington?
I like Baltimore and I like Washington.
Let's do Washington. And then we can put your Seahawks here. How's that? 49ers,
like
Washington, and Seattle. All right. We'll go with that one.
We've got all those lineups set. You still have to go do 28 more lineups, and I'll have to go enter my own. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully everyone, all of our listeners have some new ideas on sneaky stacks they could put together. Best of luck with your picks and enjoy all the excitement on game day. We can't wait to see you next time for more insights and strategies. And we've got our free contest up and running with the links in the description. We'd love to see you in our contest and joining us this weekend.